Trump does not see himself aligned with liberal democracies. Trump sees himself aligned with autocrats like Vladimir Putin.
All these British Labour politicians slagged off Trump and then they don't even go delete their tweets.
No brown person is willingly going on a White House tour in case it's a sting operation to have us deployed.
Suddenly you're in Gitmo.
Yeah, exactly.
You're from the East Wing of the White House.
You're not tricking us with that stuff.
Zelensky is a former comedian. Are these the worst hecklers any comedian has ever had to? Vance and Trump, like the hecklers from hell.
It isn't common that you are heckled by someone as a comedian in command of the greatest arsenal of nuclear weapons ever assembled in human history.
Musk was president and Trump was vice president. So what does that make JD Vance? Like assistant to the regional manager?
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's big Gareth Keenan, Dwight Schrute energy.
It's not the far right saying this stuff now. This is mainstream conservative position saying English is an ethnic identity.
We should start calling these people what they are, which is ethno-nationalist, hard right, whack jobs.
They hide behind DEI and critical race theory, but really what they want is resegregation. I'm Mehdi Hassan.
I'm Nish Kumar.
And we are not kidding. The Zeteo podcast where I get to talk to funny people about serious things, but also, I hope, funny things. Welcome back, Nish Kumar.
What an absolute pleasure to be back, Mehdi. What a pleasure to be here in the belly of the beast.
Yeah, last time we met in London, and here we are in Washington, D.C. You're here. I feel like you're visiting me. Thanks so much for coming over.
You. Yeah, I am
lovely.
I came here to visit you, and we tagged on a US
stand-up
tour.
I'm going to do the plug right at the top. Nish is here doing Nish Don't Kill My Vibe. So if you get a chance to go see him in some of his cities, do go see him. He's obviously the co-host of Pod Save the UK. He was on, we're not kidding, I had to check, September. Feels like 17 years ago.
Yeah, well, it was 17 it's 17
but it was only a few months ago.
Events.
You and I were together in London. And do you know, wherever I go after that show, a lot of people watch that show.
Yeah.
And wherever I go now, people come up to me and say, they think it's really funny. They come to me and go, have you had your Nando's yet? Like, that was the moment. I think that was a great revelation. Forget all the interesting substantive conversation we had in that show. People remember that I love Nando's and you love Nando's.
That was the headline.
That's what I get now. There's a Nando's around the corner from here, but it's not halal, sadly. So I should have got you to bring some over.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. Don't cut out a really substantial and useful chunk of your natural audience.
Crazy. Go halal Nando's in the USA. Have you eaten anywhere good since you got to the US? Talking of food?
Man, I am on what can only be described as a gout tour of the United States and Canada. It's like I've decided to set myself a task to get a medieval toe disease. Because, like,
sheer unhealthiness.
The problem is
it the calories, the sugar, everything?
Oh, everything.
Okay.
Oh, were I choosing between calories or sugar?
As a Brit, do you do that thing where you're like, that's a medium size?
Oh, yeah. You've
got to order kid size.
I'm getting much better at the portion size discrepancy, but I think it's also that the idea that normally I'm here for like quite a short burst, and so I feel like I have to eat everything. But I'm here for 6 weeks.
Oh wow!
Like this is not sustainable.
You're going to be considerably larger on your return. Let's just be honest about it. I've been here 10 years, and that's why I wear hoodies to hide it. The first time I knew that I was an American living in America. The first time I knew, like, I'm no longer just a Brit, was when I went back to the UK a couple of years in, and I ordered a brownie. I was doing head-to-head my Al Jazeera show, Oxford, little cafe opposite the Oxford Union. I ordered a brownie. This tiny little piece of chocolate came on a plate. I went, what is this? Because I was so used to the US-sized brownie, which is like this huge chunk of it. So that's when you know you're really an American. As a Brit, we're going to talk about Keir Starmer. I want to talk to you about the British Prime, who's been in the US recently.
Yes.
But before I get to, I think you arrived around the same time he did.
It was the British government has sent
Nish
two
Kumar
of its
Keir
best
Starmer.
and brightest, the Prime Minister and a stand-up comedian who routinely mislays his wallet.
Starmer, obviously, and we're going to talk about this, did what all British Prime Ministers did, and he sucked up to the US president and talked about special relationships. But you, as a non-Prime Minister of the UK, as an ordinary Brit visiting, what do you like and dislike about the US? Do you have pet peeves? Do you have things you love, and do you find things, that's annoying?
From a comedian perspective, it's great. It's great.
What, just making fun of Americans?
Well, yeah, kind of, yeah. But also I don't wish to reduce our countries down to national stereotypes, but Americans who come to comedy shows assume it's going to be good, and broadly British comedy audiences have to be convinced it's not going to be bad. And also, obviously, we just have quite a different drinking culture. Like, comedy clubs here have a 2-drink minimum. And in the United Kingdom, that is such an alien concept to people in the United Kingdom.
What you're saying is you rely on a drunken crowd to get you through the night. That's what you're really saying.
It's just...
You're like, I can't make a sober crowd laugh.
There is no comedy club in the United Kingdom, or I'll also add Ireland into this mix, that has to enforce a 2-drink purchasing minimum. The only buildings that have 2-drink minimums in our countries are schools. It's really convents.
Mosques. Well, mosques have a 0-drink minimum, I would say, in defense of my fellow Muslims.
Mosques go hard on the 0-drink minimum, yeah.
Liking this video? Then don't just watch, hit like, share and subscribe. And tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head to zeteo.com and subscribe now. You'll be supporting fearless, independent journalism.
So we're here in DC.
Yeah.
Keir Starmer was here in DC.
Yes.
Donald Trump is in the White House. I don't know, when was your last trip to the UK before this one?
My last
Sorry,
trip,
to the US.
The last time I was here was would have been May last year.
So Biden was president.
April, May, yeah, still under the Biden.
So I moved here at the end of the Obama era, 2015, his last year in office, and I would take like family and friends who came to visit to see the White House. And then Trump became president in 2017, and I just stopped. Nobody wanted to go see the White House. They're like, nobody wants to see it. It's not a tourist site when Trump's in it.
Also, I'm sorry to say this, no brown person is willingly going on a White House tour in case it's a sting operation to have us deployed.
Suddenly you're in Gitmo.
Yeah, exactly.
You're from the East Wing of the White House.
You're not tricking us with that stuff.
For like 4 years of Trump, all the people came to visit me, family and friends would come stay, and I'd take them to Congress, I'd take them to the Lincoln Memorial, never took them to the White House. Then Biden came back, White House tours back, and now Trump's back. No one goes to the White House anymore. I'm sure it's not one of your top stops in this trip.
It's a building, all those kind of buildings and institutions are in of themselves, spectacular pieces of architecture, but they are infused with the spirit of the person occupying them.
Although the White House is a super unimpressive building. You got to be going, is this it? It looks much better on White House Down or all those movies. What's the Gerard Butler one? I always forget that. The ones where the White House
isn't
gets
it Olympus
attacked.
Has Fallen?
Olympus Has Fallen,
Yeah.
and then there was a Channing Tatum one at the same time.
There's also
there's
a fantastic action sequence at the opening of the second X-Men film set in the White House.
In the White House,
Nightcrawler does
and recently the new Captain America movie has a big
I actually haven't
action
seen that
scene
yet, but yeah.
in the White House. But it's a very unimpressive building.
Right, yeah,
I think Capitol Hill is more impressive. But British prime ministers love it, right? It's a moment for them to come stand next to the president, pretend there's a special relationship. And you have Starmer coming out to be with Trump, a man he's bashed in the past.
Yeah.
What did you make of that meeting of minds?
I would always, and I'm always keen to encourage people to do this. There is a movie called In the Loop, which is the kind of midpoint. So it's a bunch of the same people that made The Thick of It, which is the British show, and then went on to make Veep. And it's a feature film that kind of sits in between those two shows. They basically went straight off the back of making that film into Veep, pretty much, I think. And I would always urge everybody to watch it because I think it's genuinely one of the best comedy films of all time. And it's also one of the best movies about Iraq and the lead up to the Iraq War. It's a great piece of satire. But one of the other things it also does is identify British politicians, and let's face it, all British cultural figures really, now a desperation to be approved of by Americans.
British politicians in particular.
There's such excitement.
But the public doesn't always want that. And to quote a crappier film, Love Actually, but that famous scene where Hugh Grant's prime minister stands up to the George Bush character, Billy Bob Thornton, got like standing ovations in British cinemas at the time. I mean, that was the Iraq War mood, but I think you'd get that now. I don't think there are people going, I know Starmer went back to the UK with people saying, what a great trip, he nailed it, he won over Trump. There was this awful scene that I want to play to you where Starmer was asked a question by a journalist and he went out of his way to say, don't divide us.
We had a really good discussion, a productive discussion, a good discussion, as a result of which our teams are now going to be working together on an economic deal. Our team is going to be working together on security in Ukraine. You mentioned Canada. I think you're trying to find a divide between us that doesn't exist. We're the closest of nations, and we had very good discussions today, but we didn't discuss Canada.
Good old Trump shutting down questioning. Is the special relationship back?
Does
it even exist?
It's really important, I think, to establish the complex position. And listen, I've been very critical of Keir Starmer on any number of issues, but I do have some sympathy for the current position of the British government coming into this situation because we spectacularly divorced our closest trading partner in 2016. And so we are now, post-Brexit, essentially we've left ourselves in a position where we are at the mercy of the United States of America, and also because the entire Labour election campaign, which was successful, continually just talked about growth and how we're going to have economic growth and the growth and the growth and the growth and the growth.
You don't want to get tariffed by Trump.
Exactly. So now suddenly the threat of tariffs becomes existential as a threat to Labour's entire economic platform, because they keep saying they can generate revenue by
going beyond the European Union.
And also generate revenue by creating economic growth, which again is like a really kind of a difficult thing to make the case for, or it's a complicated thing to make the case for at least. But they keep saying we don't need to raise taxes on wealthy people. We can do it all through economic growth.
But that leaves the orange elephant in the room, which is Donald Trump. And I find it fascinating, Nish, that all these British Labour politicians slagged off Trump. And then they don't even go delete their tweets. So you have David Lammy and Keir Starmer sitting in the Oval Office. Lammy, I think, called him a Nazi or a fascist or something vicious. Starmer, I've got the tweet here from Starmer. Starmer in 2019, after Trump endorsed Boris Johnson, said, "An endorsement from Donald Trump tells you everything you need to know about what is wrong with Boris Johnson's politics and why he isn't fit to be Prime Minister." Oh dear. Now here's Starmer going, "Don't divide us. We're great. We're pals." But to be fair to Starmer, he goes back to the UK. Everyone's like, wow, he won over Trump. He did that sycophantic thing that King Abdullah did and smart foreign leaders do. Next day, the very next day, a war leader, Volodymyr Zelensky, is sitting in the same Oval Office, doesn't do the sycophancy thing, tries to defend his country and its people, and this happens.
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly
this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
Nish, you are a comedian.
Yes.
Zelensky is a former comedian. Are these the worst hecklers any comedian has ever had to... Vance and Trump, like the hecklers from hell?
Listen, I will say, even before the war, just when Zelensky became the leader of his country, it was a very funny thing for comedians around the world to observe one of our own.
You all had a moment where you're like, could it be me next?
Actually, my primary concern was, I don't think this man should be allowed to be a leader. I know comedians. But listen, he's obviously acquitted himself incredibly well under unimaginable pressure. And it isn't common that you are heckled by someone as a comedian in command of the greatest arsenal of nuclear weapons ever assembled in human history.
And known for having a very thin skin and a short temper.
I once had a bread roll thrown at me by a disgruntled audience member. Suddenly that gets put into perspective when the bread roll is also has had a nuclear missile stuck into the middle of it. I mean, it was an astonishing spectacle. And also because, Starmer and the British government have really staked a huge amount of their international capital and now, as a result of these moves, actual capital on supporting Ukraine. So Starmer and Macron had both been in the White House in quite close succession, had both had meetings with Donald Trump in quite close succession.
And got screwed over by Donald Trump.
Yeah, and both of them came away saying, we've got some meaningful concessions on
Ukraine. But what does that tell you about both European politicians, but also our media? Like the British media is such a joke. On the Thursday, or on the Friday morning, whatever it is, Starmer's a hero, Trump and Britain, he played pitch perfect. Oh, he gave him an invite from the king. Donald Trump becomes the first president in American history to get 2 state visits. Lucky bastard to go see Charles. I don't know why Trump always gets stuff that others don't get. And then on Friday after Zelensky, suddenly all the British media is like, we must withdraw the invitation from the king. Even the Daily Mail, which for American viewers, super right-wing anti-Labour paper, Atlanticist paper is saying, attacking Trump over this, saying withdraw the invitation. I think it was the Mail on Sunday or the Daily Mail. How do you go from suddenly hero to zero so quickly? Suddenly Starmer's in this position, all of the European leaders in this position now where they're like, are we on our own? Have we been ditched by the Americans?
We're in the second Trump administration, okay? And some of these people are, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if they have the disease that Guy Pearce has in Memento, where they just can't form new memories.
True.
It doesn't make any sense to me.
8-second memories.
When I was reading, even before the Zelensky meeting, I was in New York and I was just reading all of the British press coverage of the Starmer visit. And all I could think is, you magic bean buying motherfuckers. Like, why is the level of credulity it would take to come away from that and think this is resolved when you know that Donald Trump is incredibly thin-skinned and completely changeable? I mean, at one point in the press conference with Starmer, he denied ever calling Zelensky a dictator,
Yes.
which he had done a week
Did I say
before.
that?
Yeah.
Oh, and then Vance berated Starmer.
Yeah.
Before he berated Zelensky. People forget this. Vance was doing this berating shtick as like the sidekick. I think Vance got upset that Elon Musk got all the publicity like Vance disappeared, right? If Musk was president and Trump was vice president, so what does that make JD Vance, like assistant to the regional manager? I don't know.
It's
but I
big,
think this was his
it's
comeback.
Big Gareth
right?
Keenan, Dwight Schrute energy.
This was his comeback. So on Friday, obviously, he attacked Zelensky, but people forget the day before, he took a dig at the British Prime Minister saying, you don't have free speech in your country, because he'd given that speech in Germany. And Starmer was like, yes, we do. He gave a very weak response to we wanted Hugh Grant from Love Actually there. But anyways, we got Sir Keir Starmer. And you get that moment where Vance is throwing his weight around.
Yeah.
As you say, Trump is super fickle, thin-skinned.
Yeah.
And the British are like, well, we got this huge win. And you say, it is credulous. Anyone who thinks they've got a win out of Donald Trump will let you down every single time. It makes me laugh when I hear, the Middle East story that we talked about last time, what's happening in Gaza. I have Palestinians telling me, well, Trump, he's going to be better for us. He's told us he's going to stand up. What are you talking about? He's going to screw you like he screws over everyone he's ever dealt with in his life.
And the other thing that's really important to understand, and I do think a section of the British press that approached that meeting with total credulity is now starting to wrap its mind around this idea. There has been a fundamental realignment of what we understood as the global world order.
Or the West.
Or the West, yeah, because Trump does not see himself aligned with liberal democracies. Trump sees himself aligned with autocrats like Vladimir Putin. When he had the summit with Netanyahu, who himself is a person who's like constantly on the run from corruption charges within his own country. The fact that him and Netanyahu had a meeting, again, to have a peace resolution without any Gazans or Palestinians present, they had it in Saudi Arabia. And that shows you where Trump sees himself. He sees himself aligned with Mohammed bin Salman, Vladimir Putin, and Benjamin Netanyahu, Viktor Orban, anti-democratic autocrats. These are the people that Trump is aligned with. So the very idea of a special relationship in this context is laughable. The special relationship has always been a
one-sided.
bit of a...
I mean, I lived here for 10 years. I don't think we're in DC. I think if you go out on the street and ask an American, who does America have a special relationship with? They'll either say, nobody, what the hell are you talking about? Or Israel.
It's so sad.
UK is not that place.
It's so sad. And again, for American listeners and viewers, it is so important that we restate this. In the British press, we talk about the special relationship all the time. Ever
It's
since
so one-sided.
Even though it happened, like, I would have been 2 or 3 years old, that picture of Reagan and Thatcher dancing gets trotted out constantly in our country. It is,
and it didn't even exist then.
It's absolutely
It existed
pathetic.
for like a couple of years during World War II, maybe.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely got the sense that when Brexit happened and Trump was elected the first time, there was something of a special relationship, but that felt a bit more like a suicide pact. Like that was a slightly different special relationship.
So it's interesting, right? You have the US right now, which is the US empire. The Brits had an empire. Famous quote that I pulled out. I always remember this. I wanted to run this past you. Dean Acheson, who was Secretary of State under Truman, post-war era, he famously said, Great Britain has lost an empire and has not yet found a role. And I feel like ever since Trump threw Zelensky out of the White House, Starmer, the British government, the British media is thinking, this is our moment.
Yeah, for
like,
sure.
Starmer hosted Zelensky straight away in Downing Street. King Charles took a picture with Zelensky, and Zelensky wasn't in a suit and tie. The King of England didn't mind. And suddenly there's a talk of a coalition of the willing, which I recoil from, because that's the Bush-Blair line for invading Iraq.
Why
use the line?
Why the name of God?
Why would you use the one where they invaded Iraq? But anyways, thanks, Keir Starmer. But there is this sense that the British government now, he's a hugely unpopular prime minister in charge of a hugely unpopular government, even though he's less than a year in. He's got one of the worst approval ratings for a first-year prime minister. The economy ain't doing well. This is their moment to distract everyone and say, we're going to lead the charge to protect Ukraine, stand up to evil Russia. And it feels like this is the British government and Britain trying to find that role that we lost so long ago.
Yeah, and also the interesting thing about this, and it has played very well in the United Kingdom, and I think part of the reason is that different divergent groups can see something positive for themselves in this. So for the kind of, the sort of tub thumping, we have a phrase, I'll be thrilled to introduce this as a phrase to an American audience, but we have a phrase called flag shaggers. which is a very uniquely British turn of phrase, which is when someone is overly patriotic, you are implying that they want to have sex.
Which is
with
funny
the flag.
because we're in the United States where Donald Trump literally humped a flag.
Yeah,
There's a famous
it's
image
a
of him holding a
literal
flagpole
flag shag. Yeah, he's
on
a literal
stage.
flag shagger. The flag shaggers, and it's so funny to say shag in America as well.
Everyone knows it from Austin
It
Powers.
makes you feel like Austin Powers.
It
Yeah,
does Austin Powers.
But,
Groovy, baby.
The flag shaggers are able to look at it and say Britain is we are the new global leaders. Keir Starmer is the new leader of the free world. And the sort of people who are still very upset about Brexit are able to look at it and go, we have repositioned ourselves as being strategically closer to Europe. So Starmer convenes this summit of European leaders, and they start to have the first rumblings of a conversation that I think needs to happen now, which is...
Although I worry that they take away the wrong lesson, which is let's just up defence spending and screw foreign aid, which is what they've already done.
So now this is the problem, and this is part of the issue with what Starmer is trying to do in terms of appease Trump. And so Trump has said that, European countries need to spend more on their defence. So the Labour government, again, the progressive government in our country has cut foreign aid spending.
To quote Neil Kinnock, a Labour government cutting foreign aid. But this is much broader than Labour. It is about Britain trying to find a role in the world, the nostalgia for empire, trying to get, it's been a big identity crisis in the UK, both pre and post-Brexit.
Absolutely.
The whole immigration debate and the rise of Farage, all of that stuff plays into a lot of this.
Yeah.
And I just thought it's really interesting to have this debate about Britain's role in the world. You and I think it's fair to say, are children of empire. Like we, to do the line, we are here because you were there.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
that's
you and
right.
I
Yeah,
are children of Indian immigrants.
Listen, I was born and raised in Britain, and
Same.
my father's great uncle was retired on a full military pension because he was an independence fighter who was shot in the back by British troops. Like
Wow.
that is a complicated, interesting history.
So at the same time as this debate's going on about role in the world, you have the same debate in the UK that the US is having about who is an American, who is a Brit, who is an Englishman.
Yeah.
Right? So you have this moment recently, the Trigonometry podcast, co-hosted by Konstantin Kisin, who's self-proclaimed libertarian right-winger, I think it's fair to say, interviewing another right-winger, conservative journalist Fraser Nelson, former editor of The Spectator, Scottish journalist, conservative. And they have this very stark disagreement, which went viral. Let's play that.
I would say that Rishi Sunak is as English as Tizer and Wyferns, right? He is absolutely English. He was born and bred here. And I wouldn't say that the colour of his skin makes him any
He's
less.
a brown Hindu. How is he English?
Because he's born and bred here. It depends if you think English has got an ethnic undertone. Now,
Yeah, of course it does.
Well, I disagree. And by the way, you might say it's not my country.
Okay,
You
what
might
about,
just say it, but-
what about
but
Japanese people?
I would say Hamza Yusuf, for example, is Scottish.
So, Nish, you and I are not English. That's the view now growing on parts of the English right. What was your reaction to that clip?
So the two guys that host that show are, I guess, like former comedians. Like these are people that
They say that about Kissen, but I've never seen him tell a joke or say something funny.
And listen, no one is in a better position to comment on this, the failed comedian to political podcaster route than me.
And you're a Hindu as well, like Rishi Sunak.
Yeah.
As a Muslim, I'm used to the kind of you Muslims that can never integrate. It's the first time I've heard someone say you can't be English because you're Hindu. Join the team, Nish.
This conversation has sort of burbled up in various forms down the years. And listen, one of the things that is interesting about someone like Sunak, a man for whom I have nothing but constant, ceaseless and open contempt for, is that, at various points, Sunak was the victim of racism. If you look at what happened in June of last year, where he leaves the D-Day celebrations early to give a television interview for the election, which was idiotic, and like everyone knows he shouldn't have done that. But some of the criticism he received was absolutely like tinged with racism.
There was the was it Channel 4 that taped Reform Party candidates saying the P word about him, which get him upset.
Open use of racial slurs. And the problem is that because people like Sunak and Patel and Braverman, who are these very high-profile South Asians, conservatives, are not able to engage with the racism that they receive for reasons of their own personal political ambition.
Let's separate them out, because Sunak, and I want to play a clip of Sunak's response to this in a moment, but you mentioned Suella Braverman, who some of our American viewers may know turned up for the inauguration. She's very MAGA wannabe.
Yeah.
She's super right-wing. She wrote a piece for The Telegraph, right-wing British newspaper, in which she said, I'm not English.
Yeah.
She basically endorsed the Kissen view. bizarre moment. It was
Yeah.
a bizarre moment where she goes, "Of course I'm not English. I'm not English." She said, "I'm a British Asian." Actually, the headline was, "I will never be truly English. Here is why. I am British Asian. I feel a deep love, gratitude, and loyalty to this country. But I cannot claim to be English, nor should I. This is not exclusionary. It is honest. It's what living in a multi-ethnic society entails." As somebody on Twitter pointed out, she's basically telling herself to go back to where she came from.
Yeah, well, she's finally living out her true ideals, which is the logical endpoint of Suella
I've got to
Braverman
go too.
is for her to deport herself.
No, but her excuse would be, let's be fair, I'm British, right? A lot of ethnic minorities in the UK have always said, well, we feel more British, this umbrella identity.
Yeah.
And for American viewers, again, Britain and England, two different things.
Yeah.
Great Britain and Northern Ireland, 4 countries, England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Ethnic minorities have always felt more British because there is this ethnic tinge that is assumed with Englishness, for example.
Yeah.
And the argument that Kissin and others are saying is Englishness is an ethnic identity. British is a civic identity. If you're brown like you and I, born in the UK, we can be British, but we can never be truly English, which is a very, very dangerous road to go down.
Totally.
And growing up, you remember the Tebbit test, where Norman Tebbit, right-wing British politician, said brown folks were not loyal to England because when England played Pakistan or India in cricket, the British Asians were supporting Pakistan and India. It was a Tebbit test. You must support England.
It's a phrase that like haunts our childhoods, really. The
But they've
Tebbit
taken
test.
it to the next level. And actually, I'll play Rishi Sunak, who addresses the Tebbit test very well, actually.
Yeah.
You and I have contempt for him, but he did a pretty good job in this clip.
I mean, of course I'm English. Born here, brought up here. Of course I'm English. Actually, funnily enough, I think when we were doing that first one of these some time back, you asked about the Tebbit test, and I think you did. It struck me actually, funnily enough, that this debate it moves well beyond that, because it's not enough just to support England, at cricket. It turns out it may not be enough to even play for England in cricket or football. You still can't be English.
So I think Sunak's 100% right.
I think, and I also again believe that part of this is that Sunak is no longer the prime minister, and so I think he's potentially freer
to say this stuff.
To say this stuff, and in a way, I would have appreciated some more of this kind of forthright
100%.
conversation while he was prime minister. But in any case, he is correct to say that the Tebbit, this section of the hard right in the UK is now pushing beyond the Tebbit test.
But also, where does it lead? Like, if the argument was you need to support the England football team to be English, we have black players on the England football team, right? So
but we know what they think of the black players on the England football team.
But they would never admit that, right? So we're talking about mainstream conservative. It's not the far right saying this stuff now. This is mainstream conservative position saying English is an ethnic identity. Where does that leave Raheem Sterling, who's not even born in the UK, right? Born in Jamaica, but plays for England.
In the European Championships, when in the period of in the sort of immediate aftermath to crowds being at football matches and football matches being played after the pandemic, the England football team were in fact taking the knee, adopting the gesture from US sports people like Colin Kaepernick and protesting racial injustice, and the toxicity of the criticism that they received from frontline conservatives. It wasn't even from obscure backbenchers or vloggers or podcasters. It was from frontline members of the Conservative Party. We saw the contempt that they had for the black players in the England team.
But what do we do about the stats? A lot of polls show that white people prefer to say they're English, and brown and black people prefer to say they're British.
Yeah.
How do we turn that around? Because I think, especially since I lived in the US, I do actually feel more English than I felt when I was in England.
Yeah.
Obviously, when I watch the England football team, I'm very English.
Yeah.
I don't support Scotland. With the greatest respect to my Scottish friends, I don't support the Scottish football team.
Yeah.
Right? If they do well at the World Cup, great, but they're not my team.
Yeah.
Even though I'm British, so technically they should be. But I am very much English. I have, any American who knows me knows I have very English idiosyncrasies, English culture, English food, whatever you want to call it. So how do we get past that? How do we, I hate you so cliched, how do you reclaim Englishness? Because the argument that the Kissins and the Suella Bravermans are making is there is an ethnic cultural marker that comes with being English. And no matter how long you've lived here, no matter how integrated you think you are, you can't be it unless you're really white. And one thing I'd throw back at you, Nish, to consider is their argument, and I don't know what I make of this argument, but their argument is if you're an English white family, a white English family, and you move to China, and you have kids in China, are your kids ethnically Chinese? We would probably say no.
Yeah.
Does that make a point? I just want to be fair to the Conservatives making this argument. They would say other countries do identify ethnically.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is there is a possibility to draw a distinction. I think that there is a difference between national identity and ethnicity, but I don't think one's ethnicity precludes one from adopting the national identity of the nation that you were born in.
If you were a white family living in Beijing and you had kids and you managed to get, I don't even know if you could get Chinese citizenship. You probably can't. But if you could, would you then be Chinese?
If your kids grow up in China speaking Mandarin, that is the thing. Like they might still be ethnically English, and I remain, the genetic coding in my body.
Yeah, when you tick the box on forms.
Yeah, it remains
Asian.
Indian. But the reality is that I was born in England, and
so you're saying
like
English
you,
should also be a civic identity.
I
like British.
I think it should be both.
It is.
I think it has to be both. It has to be both. And I think that actually people like, I'm sick of pussyfooting around terms. People like these far right fringe whack jobs. And I think it is also important that if we're correctly classifying things, if we're adopting appropriate nomenclature for things, we should start calling these people what they are, which is ethno-nationalist, hard right whack jobs, basically.
And they're a minority. The good news is I want to cite a poll from 2021, 4 years ago, but not that far away, from British Future, which found that 77% of white people in England agree that being English is open to people of different ethnic backgrounds who identify as English, right? So that is there. The majority of white folks do agree with us that English is open to everyone. Even the mayor of London, who is a British Pakistani, Sadiq Khan, came out very strongly in defense of Sunak, pointed out that he owns a Labrador. Can you get more English than that? Priti Patel, conservative politician, she came out and said, I'm English. I'm from Essex, she said. So the Braverman, Kissin, whoever else view, it's a minority view, and I hope we keep it that
But also
way.
it's a minority view that I think doesn't allow for the sophistication of the average person in England or Britain. So the thing that I would always say in counter to all of this is we are so capable of adopting multiple identities.
Yes.
The reality is that I am English, I'm also British, and I also am Indian, and I'm comfortable.
And I'm also European.
Yeah, and I'm also European.
I'm also an American.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm also a Muslim. And within Muslims, I'm also a Shia. Like, we can break down. I can wear, and I'm a man.
Yeah.
We can have so. Why are we so uncomfortable wearing multiple hats?
But we understand that instinctively. Ordinary people, I think, understand that instinctively. So last summer, they had a cricket match between India and Pakistan that was being played in England. Now, at the same time, the England football team was playing in the European Championships. Now, this is the same tournament that 3 years previous, it was supposed to be in 2020, but it was kicked into 2021, that all of these politicians were hammering the football team because they were taking the knee to protest racial injustice. So the tournament in 2024, the England team is playing. Again, there are lots of black players on that team. They are carrying the hopes of England, and the hopes of England rest on the football team. I cannot stress this enough for non-English listeners. The hopes of the nation ride on this football team.
Of the nation.
And during an India-Pakistan cricket match, half the crowd wanders off from the actual stadium into the bars in the corridors around the stadium so that they can watch the England football team in a penalty shootout.
India-Pakistan game, no one's actually watching the cricket. Everyone's just come in to watch the football. And everyone here, regardless of whether they're supporting India or Pakistan, is supporting England.
I remember watching that and finding it so truly powerful.
Yeah.
I sort of, for a second, I understood that ordinary people understand the complexity of like identity so much more than some of these like fringe whackers. I remember years ago, I think it was in the 2021 tournament, I was on a train. I'd been watching the England football team at home with my family. My dad, my brother, and me, and my mum, who does not like football apart from international tournaments, will always have always watched the England football team and the Indian cricket team since we were kids. And I went and watched it in Croydon, and then I was getting the train back into town, and there was a loud singing, chanting group of white England football fans on the train. And listen, I will admit that there is still a small part of me that when I see those men, and they were all men, it still has a bit of a part of me a bit of a spidey sense that goes, oh no, okay, we need to be mindful here. We need to be mindful. And then these three young girls got on the train, and one of them was a black Muslim girl wearing a hijab. And I actually remember setting myself on edge,
Concerned on her behalf.
The football fans, one of them runs over to her and gives her a double high five, and they all start singing Three Lions.
Yes.
And those kind of things make you realise that for all of these lunatics who are sort of monetised the worst ethno-nationalist impulses in our culture, there are more people, ordinary people in our countries that understand that identity is complex and fluid and changeable, and also not binary. It is totally possible to be English, British, Indian, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Shia, Sunni. Like we're such complicated beings. Our brains are these like complicated organisms.
But when you say ordinary people, what you're basically saying is that it's the politicians who are, as usual, setting us apart and doing that thing where they're like, you must, it's a classic catch-22. You must integrate and tick all these boxes to be English/British/patriotic. You do all of that and you go, but you'll never be one of us.
Yeah.
Because of the skin colour.
Yeah.
And that's something we need to push back against. Although I would say you must stop racially profiling England football fans on the train. Nish.
That's on me.
Listen, just wrong.
We've all got, but the problem is that when racism and when conversations like that are directed at powerful people and it goes undiscussed. So when the stuff happens with Sunak, it was under-discussed at the time and it creates problems in society. You look at America, the most powerful person of colour that ever lived in this country, and you think about the history of this country and what it's done, particularly to black people in this country, particularly to the indigenous people. If you think about what was done to those people in the name of advancing America, it's horrific. And then they elect a black man president.
Twice.
And one of the key things that happens when he becomes president is a television celebrity demands to see his birth certificate.
Yes.
And if you don't acknowledge the naked racism of that gesture, something terrible will happen and that man will become president and re-elected president. You know, if you don't acknowledge that.
I'm glad it's a good segue into what the final topic I want to talk about before we wrap up, which is let's look at America, because the identity crisis you're identifying in the UK is very much in full swing here. And it's really tragic here because in the UK, there's a history to it.
Yeah.
In the US, there's a history with slavery, of course. But the rallying cry from the political class has always been across the board, you know, America, the great country where we believe in the Constitution, right?
We hold these truths to be self-evident.
All that BS, which was never exercised. I mean, in reality, it was never practiced. In theory, great. But this idea of America is a constitutional republic, the identity is civic, right? It's a melting pot.
Yeah.
Even though England, by the way, is also a melting pot, right? People who think there's some fixed English identity, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But America always bragged about being the melting pot, took pride in the Statue of Liberty, all this stuff about, you know, we are a nation that is defined by your belief in the Constitution, in values, not in your skin color, not in blood and soil. That was the claim, right? And now you have Donald Trump really trying to take us back to some dark moments in history.
Yeah.
It's very much part of his identity, as you say. He comes to power and prominence off the back of the nakedly racist birther campaign. Obama is elected as the first black president, but as the joke goes, also perhaps the last black president, right? He created such a backlash from parts of white America that you go from Obama to Trump and now Trump again. And what Trump is doing second term is very dark in terms of the racial stuff.
Yeah.
One of the first things he does is put out an executive order saying an end to birthright citizenship, which you can't do by executive order because it's literally in the freaking Constitution, right? Republicans only care about the Second Amendment, the guns bit.
Yeah.
Everything else they ignore. 14th Amendment makes it very clear if you're born in the United States, you are a citizen.
Yeah.
Multiple countries have that. Trump lies and says, we're the only country that does this. We shouldn't do it. Multiple countries do it, especially in the Americas. A judge says it's blatantly unconstitutional. That is still in court. But the animus behind it, I think, is so close to what you're saying is happening in Europe, in the UK. This idea that we must narrow our conception to what it means to be British, American, European, Western. And of course, we narrow it to race.
Yeah.
Ultimately. You're not really one of us. And in Trump's case, he's saying if you're born here, you're still not one of us.
No. There is this distinct push towards a white ethno-nationalist state. There is a kind of Christian white supremacist fascist movement that is coursing through the Republican Party. You know, it isn't
the obsession with DEI.
The obsession with DEI, but like the vagaries of something like a German electoral system mean that a party like the AfD, whilst it gets 20% of the vote, which is profoundly alarming, there's still checks and balances within that system. Whereas in America, if it's one of the two, and also if it's one of the two main political parties, and they have control of the Senate and the House of Representatives, and let's not forget, a majority in the Supreme Court. Yeah. My biggest fear for this country is that they start coming after things like Brown versus the Board of Education. And I know that sounds alarmist as an outsider. Maybe that feels like we've become hysterical.
No, I'm glad you said that, because a lot of people are saying we need to speak much more clearly about the threat.
Yeah.
They hide behind DEI and critical race theory, but really what they want is resegregation, right? We should talk about the phrase resegregation. That obviously goes back to Brown and Board and desegregation. Yeah. But look, when people say to me, MAGA, 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 we now use it, the right uses it in great pride. It's not the Republican Party, it's MAGA. Yeah. It's a hostile takeover. And the left use it as a pejorative. Look at those MAGA freaks. But ultimately, the big question is MAGA, make America great again. And my question always is, when was it great?
Yeah.
When do you want us to, what year do you want to take us back to? Yeah. And what rights did people who look like you and me have in those years?
Well, those organizations are always called things like, Project 2025 is that feels like it has the spirit of all of that coursing within it. But they're always called things like the 1776 Commission. They often have these names that specifically date a time that they're aiming back at to before the abolition of slavery.
Well, now they're openly saying, you've got right-wing pundits talking openly about going back to pre-60s. So it's 50s. Okay, so we've got a decade.
Yeah.
Well, 50s wasn't so great for a lot of people in this country.
Well, we know what happened in the 1960s in this country.
That led to moves. Before we run out of time, I've got to ask you the irony of an anti-immigrant movement in the US, demonizing migrants, being led by an immigrant from South Africa. You couldn't write, if you were writing a script, you couldn't write this, could you? The white South African dude leading the very non-racist anti-immigrant movement in the US.
At what point do they accuse the Statue of Liberty as being a kind of big green woke monster?
It was a foreign import.
It was a foreign import. Yeah, this French, they're going to try and push the Statue of Liberty back to France if they can.
But we know they're fine with immigrants who are rich and white, right?
Yeah,
Donald Trump has talked about, if you have $5 million now, you can get a golden card, not a green card, a gold card, which again is so ironic because no one in our pathetic media asked the question, hold on, you said we can't have immigrants in this country because there's not enough resources, not enough space. We want to keep them. How do you suddenly have space for 5 million people? He wants to give 10 million gold cards and pay off the debt. And then you've got Musk at the center of all this. Every day I open Twitter, I refuse to call it what he calls it, and you see all of his posts because he makes sure you see all his posts. Yeah. They're always about immigration nowadays. And it's like, you're a migrant. The Washington Post has done a story pointing out that you illegally overstayed your visa, apparently. And you are leading this charge against foreigners. If you're consistent, you should go back to South Africa. In fact, you should go back to South Africa and then from there, go back to Europe. That's what consistency demands.
So the thing that concerns me is Musk, I think, is the sort of embodiment of, he's the uniting point behind two disparate groups. Not disparate, because historically they have worked together, but he's behind this alliance of white Christian nationalist supremacists and deregulated capitalists.
Yes.
And so, you look at the inauguration.
And the tech bros.
When you look at the inauguration and you see Trump and you see behind him Sundar Pichai, Tim Cook, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and you understand that is what's... And I think really we on the sort of progressive left have allowed ourselves to participate in conversations that divide groups that should be naturally in solidarity with each other. The Trump administration is a threat to immigrants, it's a threat to people of colour, it's a threat to all women, the threats that they pose to women's rights, and it is a threat to all working class Americans, including white working class Americans. The tax cuts that he brought in his first term were naked class warfare. It is redistributing wealth.
Which is why he's doing the classic, look over at the brown folks.
It's look over...
Not the billionaires.
The progressive, whatever you want to call us, liberal, left, wokeists, whatever you want to call us, have to understand that we have allowed ourselves to be divided. We participate in conversations where we say, well, maybe we need to be more sympathetic to the white working class. We need to be unabashed and absolutely declarative in what we are saying here. The Trump administration is a threat to most Americans, right? And a white working class person has a hell of a lot more in common with a black working class person or a South Asian working class person than he does with Elon Musk and Donald Trump.
Well said. On that note, we will wrap up. Let folks know where they can see you in the US.
Oh, I'm all over the place. There's still tickets available. I'll be in Atlanta.
What's the website? What's the
nishkumar.co.uk/gigs.
Lovely. Lovely. And let me do a plug. Head over to zeteo.com, subscribe so you can get new episodes of We're Not Kidding as soon as they drop. Like and subscribe this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Keep watching us. We've got more great guests to come. But for now, I'm Mehdi Hassan.
I'm Nish Kumar.
And we were not kidding. We're Not Kidding is a Zeteo production. I'm your host, Mehdi Hassan. Today's co-host was Nish Kumar. Our executive producer is Kieran Alvey. Our senior producer and editor is Frank Capello. Our music was composed by Andy Clausen. Our design is by Alicia Tatone. Our mix engineer is Valentino Rivera. And the title card animation is by Ehsan Mezghali.